So the original duology of Dragon Quest came out not too long ago, and I wanted to take a moment to shine some light on both of them, doing more than just playing the opening hours of both games in order to give a bit more of a streamlined opinion on them. For quick context, I am playing this on the Switch 1 version, which does not give you a free upgrade path of any kind if you want to play on Switch 2. I'm personally okay with this, but I did notice when comparing footage to any gameplay clips I'd see of other versions, the Switch one is easily the worst one from a technical standpoint regarding visual fidelity. And that doesn't really feel like that big of a fumble for this package by any means, because it still looks like an absolute treat. On one hand, regarding the Switch, the only means we had to play the original trilogy were the mobile ports of the games that were just ported over and slapped onto the Switch. I played those at the time they were new for the device, and they're definitely a far cry from what this package and even the Dragon Quest III 2D HD Remake were able to accomplish. Aside from just being a blatant visual overhaul, Dragon Quest I specifically does manage to remove a lot of the tedium from the original game on NES, and instead makes it closer to the bulk of what the rest of the Dragon Quest series is like. You still play the entire game, of course, as a single character fighting multiple monsters. However, so much additional story with entirely new cutscenes that were never there before have been added, as well as new spells and moves that make exploration and combat that much more interesting on the whole. I will say, probably my favorite change is the removal of torch items being consumable in order to navigate the game's dungeons. Before, if you needed to enter a cave and you didn't have a torch item on you, all you would see on the screen would be your little character on there, and the rest of it would be pitch black. You could still move about the dungeon fully on your own, but you wouldn't be able to see where you were actually going. This, of course, makes the original Dragon Quest on NES feel a bit more like a traditional dungeon crawler rather than a turn-based RPG. Now, while you have your little guy on screen holding his torch and it illuminates the room a little bit, it's in no way a necessity in order to see what's right in front of you. You're able to fully explore the dungeons like any other game that Square Enix puts out. I'm sure there's probably someone out there who's unhappy with this change, but having played through the original game a couple years ago on Switch, and even playing the NES version on traditional hardware fairly recently, this 100% was my least favorite feature of Dragon Quest I in its entirety. I'm glad the developers decided to make this change. Next we have Dragon Quest II, which is much more in line with the rest of the franchise as opposed to Dragon Quest I. There is a new party member who comes into play very early on, and they leave just as quickly once you start getting the other characters from the original. But, and while I don't have footage of them, they do eventually come back at one point and stick with the main party for the rest of the game. Though, knowing how exactly you do this, it's a bit further into the game than I was able to get for the footage of this video, so while I didn't quite make it there, knowing where exactly this character comes into play, it feels very natural and you still have plenty of game left afterwards, so you don't feel like you're just getting this little tinker toy at the very end with nothing cool to use them on. Speaking of the party members, similarly to Dragon Quest III 2D HD, you have the ability to toggle if you want the game to explicitly tell you where you need to go in order to progress the game. Even with this feature turned on, it does still take a couple of hours in order to get the rest of the party. The game's overall pacing is definitely the more complete package, I would say, between this duology, as Dragon Quest I is easily the shorter game out of the two. And I say that playing both back-to-back when they came to the Switch. Dragon Quest I back then took me about 10 hours roughly to finish, whereas Dragon Quest II took me about 20 to 25. Just getting the original trio alone, despite being blatantly told where to go and knowing where I needed to go and how to make it happen, it still did take me about 6 to 7 hours to get the original trio together. Now granted, in all fairness, the additional cutscenes and how the story has been built upon in this version does take much more time to get into to let you finally play the game. In fact, just the opening cutscenes alone, if you're just reading everything and letting the game play out as is, you're not fast forwarding or mashing skip text of any kind, it does take a good 20 minutes of pure plot before you're even able to control your hero. None of this pacing is necessarily a bad thing, and I don't say that to knock the game's quality. Overall, Dragon Quest II is a much more grand game than Dragon Quest I, and it's nice that the early chapters in the game don't leave you feeling way too weak and overwhelmed before you even have your full party. I think the extensive use of story early on gives you a good idea of pacing of what to expect going in, because really, This is a much more realized version of Dragon Quest II, and that's great. What's not as great, and a bit of a nitpick personally, is a feature that got added in the Dragon Quest III remake that is returning in both Dragon Quest 1 and 2. There's the ability to recall dialogue with NPCs that basically you talk to a character, you hit a button, and immediately your character is able to hold on to whatever information they were told in a small menu that you can look back on as much as you want. However, you're limited to only 30 of these at a time before you need to start erasing stuff in order to remember new things. While 30 might sound like a lot, when trying to make use of the feature genuinely, it really isn't. If anything, it feels kind of redundant and cumbersome when you already have the option to just explicitly be told where to go at any point in time. Especially when there are fun little secrets to find in the hub world anyways that keep you in a good shape without having to grind an ungodly amount in order to progress with what you're trying to do. With that aside, mini medals were retroactively added into Dragon Quest I, which is nice. It certainly extends the playtime a little bit, but even with playing majority of the series on my own, the mini medals have always come off as a bit of a novelty to me personally. Unless you take the time to actually find just about all of them, there's really not that many rewards that make the entire thing feel worthwhile, as by the time you have most of those, you're already near the end of the game and have some of the best stuff that you can up to that point anyways, that you don't really need to find them. At least to me. I don't mean to make this sound like a negative when I bring this up, but that's just been my experience with playing just about every mainline game that's been released up to this point. On a much more positive note, a change I can happily say has been implemented this time around in Dragon Quest II is how you go about getting your third-party member. In the previous version that was on Switch, i.e. the mobile port that was slapped over, in order to get them, the premise is simple. You get hinted at what you're supposed to do, you go get your plot MacGuffin from a dungeon somewhere, you bring it back, and you use it on the thing to get the character. Simple. Except, for some weird reason, I had to look it up in a walkthrough and even had to leave a comment because the video itself explaining it didn't mention this little detail. Unless you opened your menu with a very specific button, you wouldn't be able to use the item on the character to get them to join your party. You would just get told, like, you use the item. Nothing happened. And it was weirdly obtuse for no reason, because you have the right answer then and there, but for some reason, unless you open the menu a certain way, it will or will not work. This time around, in this remake, they completely fixed this. Once you get the item, and you go to the thing to get the character, a cutscene just plays, and the character joins you then and there, no issues. I cannot express how annoying that was originally, and I am so thrilled they fixed it. There's also now a lottery system that's been added into Dragon Quest II, which encourages you to actually spend time at the shops. So, as you buy things and sell them, you're given little tickets that you can take to this booth in one of the towns early on in the game. And then just randomly, you're given items that usually, from my experience, range from something as simple as a simple healing item to genuinely good equipment that can make early game an absolute cakewalk. It just depends on the luck of the draw. As a returning player to Dragon Quest II, I don't know how much I'll use this feature. I'll definitely make some use of it, but unless I get something genuinely good, I already kind of know where the good stuff is, so I don't really feel like I need to hold my breath just buying and selling items to get tickets to hope this random draw gets me really good for no reason. It's a lot of easy, accessible quality of life improvements that this duology brings together, and that's great. I love it when NES-era RPGs are able to get a facelift of some sort that just make them more digestible to someone who wouldn't otherwise care about them, and let more people just share what this is. I can only hope that before long, we will get a proper announcement of a 2D HD remake of Dragon Quest IV sooner than later. Without rambling too long, I give Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD a 10 out of 10. For what this package provides and what it set out to do, I really wasn't left with any insane expectations that didn't go fulfilled. Everything that this package set out to do, it succeeded in. What you get are two underutilized classics that are finally getting their proper time to shine, without feeling they need to overcompensate on why they're special. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, everyone.